All right, what's going on, everybody? CJ Williams of QC Amplify. Let's get into some entertainment and content news. Charlamagne the Guy just inked a deal with Netflix, $200 million. Congratulations to him and his Black Effect podcast network. Major deal, Netflix. That means Netflix is going to feature their podcast. There are some pros and cons to this. I want to talk about what this could mean to my fellow creators out there. So let's get into it. Again, I'm CJ Williams. Be sure to subscribe to this channel wherever you're listening, wherever you're watching. Wherever you're watching, be sure to listen to this. So Charlamagne the Guy, $200 million deal with Netflix. I forget how many years it is, but he gets to take his network of podcasts to Netflix. There's some other stuff going on, iHeart, all that stuff. It's a big deal. A lot of money flowing through podcasts. Now, we had to see this coming because over the years, especially last year during the presidential the general election, we saw presidential candidates running to podcasts because the audiences on these podcasts, on these platforms, are growing. Podcasts becoming more mainstream. People are getting their news from podcasts. People are trusting what they see and hear on podcasts. So we had to see this coming. Plus, I don't know about your algorithm, but my algorithm feeds me stuff all the time of podcasts. And podcast after podcast. And you get to wondering, how are these people able to keep these going? What's going on? So I had to figure out, like, oh yeah, they're building networks. They have networks. They're able to feed off one another. They're able to have bargaining power as a network, cross promotion, all this stuff. Network. And that's why I launched a network myself, something local to Charlotte, QC Amplified, where I'm creating a network of podcasts to highlight what's going on here in Charlotte and surrounding, stories from people within Charlotte, for Charlotte, by Charlotte, all that stuff. So a month before this deal got announced, I kind of rolled out my idea for a podcast platform or network here in Charlotte. But this is good news and it's bad news. Good news in the sense that, well, let's talk about it. It's good news in the sense for creators where you can see that there's opportunity in podcasts. It's not just dying. You don't have to be out here on the island alone. I mean, you can choose to be on the island alone, but you don't have to be. There's money flowing from these big networks, streaming, of course, Netflix, but Disney is talking about getting into this because they're going to use podcasts as a way to develop new shows. Instead of pouring a bunch of money into doing a show and risking it, they start out as a podcast where there's less money, less production costs. They don't have to pay a room full of writers. They don't have to pay all this stuff and arranging all this sets and all this stuff, production. Start off as a podcast, build an audience that way. Then if it grows, we can create a show. We already have a built-in audience with it. So Disney's talking about getting into it. Spotify has this video feature now. Of course, YouTube is the biggest podcast platform, but then you got Netflix getting into it. It's not going to stop there. It's not going to stop there. For networks, this is great because, again, as a network, you have bargaining power as a network. You get the support from a network. When I say bargaining power, it means sponsorships. When sponsors see that you're part of a network, they're more likely to work with you or work with you individually as a podcast, as a show, or the network. So there's credibility and there's all that stuff that comes with being a part of a network. There's the support of the network. And every network is different. It might be production, it might be sponsorship, it might be other things, helping you find guests, helping you with your show, all this stuff. But there's also the cross promotion where, if the other podcasts will promote yours and your show will be promoted on other podcasts. You might be a guest on another podcast. You might have another person as a guest on yours, and you all are in the same network, so everybody benefits from it. Everybody has a part in building the network, so everybody benefits from the success of the network. All right, so let's talk about the pros. Obviously, we have the guaranteed compensation, which they might use for obviously just putting money in their pocket, budgets for production and marketing. So we don't know the details of these deals with Netflix and all this stuff, but Netflix may be helping covering costs of production, or that money goes to production. So the money. Then there's the built-in audience that Netflix already has with their streaming platform. So, people that may have not known about these podcasts before, now they get access to them, and these podcasts get access to a wider audience. So the distribution helps with that. Enhanced production, marketing support, all that stuff. So also other things that may come from it, they're on a bigger platform, which means more credibility. So they might get, we're talking about the hosts, you know, more opportunities for live events and selling merchandise and all the ancillary stuff that might come with a deal like this, which is great. More money, right? But there's another side to this. Anytime you sign a deal like this with a big platform like that, or any network, even when somebody's working with me on my network, there's a certain level of control that they're gonna give up. So Charlamagne, his network, iHeartRadio, these podcasts, they're giving up some control. We don't know what it is though, but we do know if you sign up with a deal like Netflix, you're not gonna have much of a YouTube. Like that content is not going to YouTube. The social media stuff, you're not gonna have much of that. Netflix is gonna control all of that stuff. So with what they're getting with money, they're gonna give up some control. Netflix might own the content outright. They may own that, meaning the host can't really do anything with it. They're just the face of it now at that point. Netflix may own it. They might have control over how long these shows can be, who are the guests, what they can say. You know, now another pro I forgot to mention is not having to go and search for sponsors. Like that's a lot of work with talking to sponsors, negotiating with them, all that stuff. They don't have to worry about that. You know, so but they do have to now worry about what Netflix wants them to do because they're gonna be limited. There's gonna be some limitations. Now they don't have to go out and get sponsorship, so that's good. But Netflix is still gonna have some control. So that creative control can be big. It might be who can be deciding who can be guests on there again, like what they can talk about, how long stuff is, the assets, controlling the assets and the visuals. Like they may not have repurposing rights, you know, for YouTube and social media. Maybe they don't want that. So there are some pros and cons that comes with a deal like this. We don't know all of the stuff. But you can guarantee that Netflix has some control of this content. And I would still want to say congratulations to Charlamagne the Guy for the Black Effect Podcast Network and what he's doing, what he's building over there. I'm not much of a fan of Charlamagne, but from a business sense, this is good for him. And anybody who gets a deal like this, just knowing that, hey, you know, they started something from zero and they're able to basically ink a deal like this. Now they're going to be giving up some stuff. They'll be giving up some control. But they're going to be gaining money. And if that's what it's all about, then go for it. You know, some people value the control more than the money. You know, if you're doing just fine by yourself, controlling everything, working the sponsors and all that stuff, you may not want a deal like this to where Netflix comes in. Yeah, they give you a lot of money, but you ain't going to be able to do all that stuff you were doing for. Maybe you don't want to do that stuff. So it's good for them. So yeah, this has been CJ Williams. Be sure to subscribe to the channel, subscribe to wherever you're listening and watching with QC Amplified News. I'll be bringing you more. Matter of fact, there's some stuff going on with Taylor Sheridan. I think we'll talk about that next. It's not new news, but it's kind of big. It lets people know that this content thing is serious. All right. So that's all I got in this one. I'll check you guys out next time. Be sure to follow along. Go to the website, listen to the podcast we have there. Until next time.